In a small town, where the streets whispered secrets and the stars bore witness to hidden pain, lived a young woman named Jessica. She had once believed in fairy tales. Her heart, pure and full of hope, had dreamed of a love that would hold her close through storm and sunshine. And when Williams came into her life, charming and kind, she thought she had found her forever. Their wedding was modest, but her eyes sparkled with dreams of a beautiful life. She had stitched every thread of her soul into the fabric of their marriage. But the fairy tale faded fast. Soon after the vows were exchanged, Williams changed. He became distant, his warmth replaced by cold silences. Jessica would ask gentle questions, trying to understand, but every inquiry was met with anger. And then one day her heart broke completely. She discovered the truth. Williams was seeing another woman. He would leave the house under the pretense of work, only to spend hours with her. Jessica's world shattered when she saw them together. The image haunted her, the laughter, the touch, the betrayal. When she confronted him, his face twisted with fury. He didn't deny it. Instead, he raised his hand. From that day on, the pain wasn't only emotional, it became physical. Day after day, he punished her for catching him, for existing, for loving him too much. She cried alone at night, clinging to the silence, hoping someone, anyone, might hear her soul scream. But the walls were thick, and the world outside didn't see. She painted a smile for neighbors, hid bruises with makeup, and wore long sleeves in summer. No one knew that beneath her quiet grace lived a woman bleeding in silence. Yet inside her something stirred. A small ember of strength, barely glowing but still alive. Each time he hurt her, that ember grew. Each lie he told, each blow he struck, only fed her will to survive. Jessica was breaking, but she was also becoming. One day, as the sun rose through her dusty window, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes, though tired, held a fire. She touched the reflection of her bruised face and whispered, "You don't deserve this. You are not the villain. You are not weak. You are still here." That morning she made a decision, not just to escape the cage, but to rebuild her life piece by piece. For every woman silenced by pain, for every heart that still beats despite being broken, Jessica stood tall. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, she knew one thing: she had survived the storm. And now it was time to find the sun again. Days passed like shadows, quiet and unkind. The bruises faded, but the wounds on her heart stayed raw. Jessica learned to smile without showing her teeth, learned to speak softly so as not to anger him, and learned to cry only when the lights were off. She became a ghost in her own home. But one thing never left her: the ember. Late at night she began to write. Her journal became her sanctuary. Page after page, she poured her soul into words no one would read. She wrote letters to herself, to the girl she used to be, to the woman she was becoming. "Dear Jessica, you are not broken. You are still whole, even with scars. Your heart is tender, not weak. One day, you will breathe freely again." One morning when Williams left under the same lie, "I'm going to work," Jessica stood at the door long after he was gone. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. She didn't move. She listened, to the silence of an empty house. For once, the silence felt like peace, not fear. She reached for the phone and dialed the number she had memorized from a leaflet she hid inside a cookbook. A women's shelter. Her voice shook as she spoke, but they listened. They didn't ask her to explain everything. They believed her. That night, with a small bag of clothes and her journal pressed tightly to her chest, Jessica walked out the door. Not just of her house but of her cage. The shelter welcomed her like a quiet sunrise. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. She woke up to the laughter of children, the smell of toast, and women just like her. Survivors with eyes that had seen too much but still held light. Healing didn't come all at once. She had flashbacks, panic attacks, moments where she doubted if she had done the right thing. There were nights she missed him. Not the monster he became, but the man she thought she married. But then she remembered. She was worth more than a hollow love and cruel hands. Jessica joined therapy, began art classes, and found work helping others who had suffered as she did. Her story became her power. She started to speak at shelters, schools, and even small community events. Her voice, once silenced, was now a beacon. People cried when she spoke. They saw the pain, but they also saw the strength. Years later, she stood before a crowd at a women's conference. Her hair was longer, her smile brighter. She held her journal and read an entry from the darkest day. When she finished, there was silence, then thunderous applause. And in that moment, Jessica didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a warrior. She looked into the crowd and said, "To anyone hurting, to anyone afraid, know this, love does not hurt, does not bruise, it does not break. And you are not alone. You deserve more. You deserve peace. And you can rise." It had been 2 years since she walked away. 2 years since she reclaimed her name, her voice, her peace. Jessica now lived in a small apartment filled with warm light, soft cushions, and little notes she wrote to herself and pinned on the walls. Words like, "You are enough," and "Scars are proof that you healed." She had found a quiet rhythm to her days. Working at the shelter, painting in the evenings, sipping tea on her balcony at sunset. The sky had become her diary now. Every sunrise was a reminder of how far she had come. Every sunset, a promise that tomorrow would be kinder. Then came Ethan. He wasn't part of her plan. She had built walls around her heart, tall and careful. But Ethan was patient, never trying to climb them, only waiting on the other side, quietly, respectfully. They met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. He had smiled and stepped back. "You first," he'd said. Simple words, but they stirred something inside her. For weeks they met accidentally. At the park, the coffee shop, the library. Slowly, gently they began to talk. He never asked her to share more than she wanted. But when she did, he listened. Not like a man wanting to fix her, but like someone who saw the strength in her survival. One rainy afternoon she told him everything. She expected him to look at her with pity. But instead he took her hand, held it softly and said, "I'm honored you trust me with your story. You're incredible." Jessica cried, not out of sadness, but because it had been so long since someone had seen her without judgment, without fear, and simply loved her soul. Their love wasn't a whirlwind. It was slow, healing, like rain falling gently on dry earth. He never made promises he couldn't keep. He only showed up every day in little ways that mattered. She still had moments of fear. Shadows from the past would sneak up sometimes. But now she wasn't alone. She had herself. She had Ethan. And more than anything, she had the unshakable truth that she was no longer the woman who cried herself to sleep. She was Jessica. Brave. Beautiful. Reborn. And every time she looked in the mirror, she whispered the words that had saved her once before. You are not the villain. You are not weak. You are still here. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share.